Hello. My name is Iris Edwards. Yes, that Edwards. The one they tried to erase from every plate, every photo, every story ever told about our family's empire. My sister once filmed me eating food from the trash, food I made, and posted it online to humiliate me. She said, "If you want to eat, dig like a stray dog." But she forgot whose name was still buried on the deed. They cut me out of the will I already owned, branded me unstable, signed my silence, but I stayed quiet long enough to watch them build their fantasy on top of my foundation. Now ask yourself, what happens when the ghost they buried shows up? With proof. And not to fight, but to finish. I've worked in kitchens since I was 20, and I thought I'd seen it all. The yelling, the stress, the heat that never ends. But that afternoon taught me how cruel family could be when money and pride got mixed into the recipe. It was a slow day. Late autumn in Portland has this damp chill that seeps through the windows no matter how tightly you shut them. I'd been standing on my feet since 7 that morning. Around 3, when the lunch rush died down, I sat by the prep counter to eat what was left from a customer's plate. 2 untouched slices of roast beef, a small piece of bread. Nothing spoiled, nothing dirty. I just hated to see good food go to waste. I didn't hear the door open until the kitchen went quiet. Then came her voice, sharp, amused, like a knife scraping glass. "So this is what you do on your breaks now, Iris." When I turned, Isolde already had her phone pointed at me. Her nails were perfect, her hair pulled into that tight blonde knot she wore when she wanted people to take her seriously. My sister, the star of the restaurant chain. "Smile," she said. "You want to eat like a stray, at least make it look cute for the camera." The cooks froze. Nobody moved. The air smelled of garlic and humiliation. I put the spoon down and started to explain, but before I could finish, she grabbed the plate and dumped the food straight into the trash. "If you want to eat," she added, her tone sweet as vinegar, "dig like a dog." The laughter that followed was nervous, thin. I tied up the trash bag and walked out. No shouting, no tears. Just the sound of my shoes on the tile floor and her voice echoing after me. "Don't forget to clock out." Outside, it was drizzling. The cold air felt cleaner than the kitchen. I stood by the dumpster, took one deep breath, and told myself I wouldn't cry at work. Not here. Not for her. By the time I got home that evening, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Group messages from coworkers, notifications from social media. I didn't open them right away, but I knew. I knew what she'd done. When I finally looked, the video was already everywhere. Posted first in the staff chat with a caption that read, "Nepotism doesn't mean we let the trash eat." Someone had leaked it to TikTok within an hour. 10,000 views. Then 50. Then 100,000. The comments were what you'd expect. Half mocking, half pretending to be concerned. "Is she homeless? Looks like someone needs therapy. This is the sister of the owner? No way." I scrolled, staring at the tiny looping image of myself holding that spoon. The internet never sees the full story. It just sees a moment and makes it eternal. I thought about calling Isolde. I even typed the words, "Why would you do this?" Then I erased them. She knew exactly why. I turned the volume off and replayed the clip. Watching myself from that angle felt like watching a stranger. I'd spent years helping build that kitchen, perfecting dishes, training staff, making sure things ran smoothly after our father died. Yet there I was, turned into a meme. Around midnight, I shut my phone off and sat by the window. The rain outside had turned heavier, tapping against the glass in slow rhythm. Portland nights always feel lonelier after the lights from the food trucks go out. I kept hearing my father's voice in my head. "You build greatness quietly." He said it every time I complained that Isolde got the interviews, the credit, the awards. He'd laugh, pat my shoulder, and tell me that some fires burn brighter in silence. But silence hadn't protected me. It had made me invisible. When I finally opened the fridge, there wasn't much inside. A carton of milk close to its expiration date, a jar of pickles, half a lemon. I wasn't hungry anyway. I took out a small notebook and wrote on the first page, "Things I will never forget." At the top I wrote, "The way she looked at me, like I was less than human." I sat there, pen still in my hand, staring at the empty page beneath it. More memories wanted to come out, but I let them stay where they were. Sometimes naming the pain too early only gives it more power. The next morning, I went to the restaurant before the doors opened. I wanted to clean out my station quietly, no drama. The kitchen smelled like bleach and stale bread. No one looked me in the eye. Even the dishwasher, who usually greeted me with a nod, kept his head down. I gathered my knives, my apron, my notebook of recipes. As I bent to tie my bag, I saw the same trash bin from yesterday still full. The black bag was tied the way I'd left it. Inside, I could see the edge of that white container, the one with the bread and the slices of roast beef. I stood there for a moment. Then I lifted it out, placed it beside the recycling bin, and carried my things to the car. At home, the apartment felt too quiet. The city hummed beyond the walls, cars splashing through puddles, people moving on with lives that didn't include me. I put the trash bag on the counter and opened it carefully. Inside, the container looked almost new, the bread still soft. I sat down, tore off a piece, and ate it slowly. Not because I was hungry, but because I wanted to reclaim the moment she'd turned into a joke. "Not everything you throw away is garbage," I whispered. The bread tasted like nothing, just air and defiance. But it stayed down, heavy and warm in my stomach. I washed the container and left it on the drying rack. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at it as if it might tell me what to do next. Outside, the rain started again, steady and quiet. Somewhere downtown, I imagined Isolde laughing, maybe checking her phone for likes, making sure the world knew how polished she looked compared to me. Let her laugh, I thought. The internet forgets fast, but I don't. That night, as I turned off the kitchen light, I caught my reflection in the dark window. I didn't look broken, just tired of being the quiet one, the reasonable one, the one who stayed out of the spotlight. I went to bed knowing one thing for sure. She'd taken my dignity in front of the staff, but not my resolve. Because she didn't know I'd been saving something far more powerful than a piece of bread. That night I barely slept. The rain kept slapping against the window, and the sound of it blended with the echo of Isolde's voice in my head. I'd been saving something stronger than a piece of bread. My silence, my composure, but I didn't know yet how much that would cost me. By morning, my phone rang twice before I managed to answer. It was Carla, the shift manager. "Iris, Isolde wants to see you in her office. 10 sharp. She said it's important." Important. That word carried a weight I'd learned to dread. I dressed quietly, pulling my hair into a low ponytail, then stepped outside. The air was colder than the night before, the kind of wind that carries leftover rain, and the smell of wet pavement. The streets were slick, traffic sluggish. When I reached the restaurant, the staff looked up but didn't greet me. A few offered awkward smiles, others turned away. Shame is contagious in a workplace like ours. One of the new waitresses whispered something to the bartender, and both of them stopped laughing when I passed. The office door was half open. Inside, Isolde sat behind the desk that had once been our father's. Everything about the room had changed since she took over. The framed food magazine covers, the new coffee machine, even the fake orchids that looked too white to be real. Sitting in the corner, silent but watchful, was Virella, her mother, my father's second wife. She was dressed impeccably, as always, in beige and pearls. "Come in, Iris," Isolde said, her voice clipped. "Let's handle this professionally." Professionally. That word, too. It was her favorite disguise. I sat down across from her. She kept her phone face down on the desk, a small red light blinking from the corner. "I'm sure you understand," she began, flipping through a folder, "that after the incident yesterday, and the reaction online, we can't risk more attention. It's become a reputational matter." "Reputational," I repeated. My tone came out steady, though my pulse was loud in my ears. "Yes." She smiled as though this were some polite conversation over coffee. "So I've prepared something standard for you to sign. Voluntary leave. That way you'll have time to rest, the staff can focus, and the brand can recover." She slid the document toward me, a neat stack of printed pages clipped at the corner. Across the top, bold letters read, "Voluntary leave acknowledgement." Virella spoke for the first time, her voice smooth and cold. "This isn't punishment, dear. It's just better for everyone. Better for everyone. Except me." I scanned the first page. The language was careful, legalistic. I acknowledged that my actions brought disrepute to the company. That wasn't true. I waive any right to legal action or compensation during this leave. That was dangerous. I agreed to maintain discretion regarding all family matters. That one made my stomach twist. I looked up. You want me to admit fault for something I didn't do? Isolde crossed her arms. It's not about fault, Iris. It's about optics. People don't care about the truth. They care about headlines. You sign, you step away for a few weeks, and when this blows over, we'll talk about reinstating you. When it blows over, I said quietly, you'll have erased me completely. Her smile didn't falter. You're being dramatic. I'm protecting the business. Dad built this for all of us. Don't make it harder than it has to be. The mention of our father's name hit like a slap. I leaned back, forcing myself to breathe evenly. I'd like to get legal advice before signing, I said. She shrugged. If you want to make this legal, we'll have to involve HR formally. That means public filings, press access. Are you sure you want that story out there again? A threat disguised as a choice. I set the papers down and folded my hands. You always were good at protecting yourself, Isolde. Varela shifted slightly. Iris, she's trying to help you. I turned to her. Like you helped Dad's will disappear? The air changed. For a second, Isolde's pen froze above the folder. Varela's smile wavered, then returned smaller. You shouldn't talk about things you don't understand. I lowered my voice. Maybe I understand more than you think. They watched me for a long moment. Finally, Isolde pushed the pen toward me. Just sign it. Don't turn this into a scene. I picked up the pen. My hands were steady. I signed where she pointed, then let the ink dry for a heartbeat. As she reached for the paper, I flipped the page slightly and noticed something. The numbering on the last clause skipped from 4 to 6. A small typo, but enough to make the contract invalid in court. Before handing it over, I took my phone from my pocket, snapped a quick photo, and tucked the signed copy into my bag. I slid a different sheet, one of the unsigned duplicates, across the desk. If I'm trash, I said softly, you won't miss this. Isolde frowned, confused for a second, then took it without noticing. Varela watched me with the faintest trace of recognition, as if she understood exactly what I'd done. Her expression didn't change, but she gave a small nod, a queen acknowledging a rival she didn't expect to have. I stood up. Are we done? Isolde leaned back in the chair. Yes, we're done. As I turned to leave, I caught her whispering to her mother. She'll be forgotten in a month. I didn't look back. Downstairs, the restaurant was quiet. The first staff were setting tables, the smell of fresh bread drifting through the air. I walked slowly past the bar, glancing at the plaque that hung above it, Edward's Family Legacy Award, presented to Isolde Farrow. The photo beside it showed both of us standing with our father years ago. They'd cropped the picture, leaving just the corner of my arm. My mind slipped backward to the day the restaurant first opened. I could still see my father, sleeves rolled up, grinning as the new oven buzzed for the first time. That's your domain, he told me, patting the stainless steel. The dishes that come out of there, that's your voice. He'd made me create the first dish on the menu, a simple stew layered with spices from his hometown. I'd named it Homecoming. When the food critics came, they loved it. A week later, Isolde posted a photo of herself beside the pot with the caption, "My signature dish returns." I never corrected her. Dad had said, "Pick your battles." But standing there now, years later, I realized that silence had cost me more than any argument could have. I left through the front door. The wind outside was sharp, tossing leaves across the parking lot. I walked to my car, opened the door, then paused. The sign form, my copy, rested in my bag. I ran my fingers over it, feeling the texture of the paper, the indentation of the pen marks. Inside that folder, she thought she buried me under legal words and fine print. But I still had my voice. Not loud, not public, but real. Before driving away, I looked at the restaurant one last time. Through the window, Isolde was already back at the counter, smiling for someone's camera. Your name's on the plaque now, I thought. But the recipe was mine. And buried in an old file drawer, something else still had my name on it. The folder from Isolde's office was still sitting on my kitchen table, half open, half an accusation. I tucked it there a week ago, meaning to sort through the rest of my things, but every time I looked at it, something in my chest tightened. That paper with my forged silence, my so-called voluntary leave, wasn't the end of it. Deep down, I knew there were still parts of his story that hadn't been told. The rain hadn't stopped all week. It came in drizzles, sometimes harder in the evenings, soaking the sidewalks of East Portland and leaving the air smelling of wet earth and exhaust. I'd been living mostly on coffee and toast, keeping my head down, watching my name fade from the news cycle. That Saturday morning, the knock came. Not hurried, but firm, 3 even raps against the wood. I froze halfway between the sink and the counter. Nobody came to see me anymore. I walked to the door and opened it a few inches. "Miss Edwards?" the man asked, his voice deep and polite. He looked about 70, dressed in a dark coat that looked older than him but cared for like a ritual. "My name is Eldon Farrow. I was your father's lawyer." The sound of that word, lawyer, snapped me fully awake. "My father's." He nodded, glancing past me as if checking whether I was alone. "May I come in for a moment?" He asked me to deliver something. "Only under certain circumstances." I hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment wasn't much to look at. A couch, a few shelves, the kettle still hissing on the stove, but he didn't seem to care. He took off his hat, holding it neatly in both hands. "He told me," Eldon said, "to give this to you only if you were ever excluded." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick brown envelope sealed with string. The edges were worn, the paper faintly yellowed. "It's been sitting in my safe since the month before he passed." My throat tightened. "Excluded!" His eyes softened. "You'll understand once you read it." He placed the envelope on the table, nodded once, and turned toward the door. I managed to ask, "You're not staying?" He paused, hand on the knob. "He said you'd know what to do. For what it's worth, Miss Edwards, your father was proud of you. He spoke of you often." Then he left, closing the door with quiet finality. For a long moment, I just stared at the envelope. The string was stiff, the knot deliberate, like he'd tied it himself. My hands were shaking when I pulled it loose. Inside were several documents and a folded letter written in his neat, slanted handwriting. "Iris," it began, "you always had the fire. You just didn't need the spotlight. If they ever push you out, this is yours. Don't let them rewrite your story." I pressed my fingers over the ink, feeling the faint ridges of his pen strokes. The rest of the papers were legal, stamped, notarized, official. The will stated that I, Iris Edwards, was the sole beneficiary of the restaurant group, including all intellectual property and assets. My father's signature glimmered in dark blue ink beside the notary's seal. I read the date twice, 2 months before his death. That didn't make sense. When my father passed, Varela had told me there was no will. She'd said he believed in a verbal legacy, that everything would be shared fairly between us. I'd believed her. I'd been too broken, too tired from the funeral, too ready to assume good intentions from people who smiled at me while taking everything he built. A smaller note was stuck to the back of the folder, written on an old yellow post-it. File copy sent to both daughters, CC to Iris email. My stomach dropped. I rushed to my laptop, opening my old Gmail account. The password still worked. I searched Farrow and Jennings, and there it was, a notification from years ago marked read. Except I'd never seen it. I opened the security log. The message had been opened from a different IP address 2 days after my father's death. My account had been accessed, then blocked. I sat back, heart pounding. Isolde. Or Varela. Maybe both. All those months after the funeral came flooding back. The memory of that week, how everything blurred together. The smell of lilies, the murmurs of sympathy, the cold efficiency with which Varela handled everything. She'd taken charge of the service, the bank accounts, the calls to investors. "You need to rest," she'd said. "Let us handle the business side." And I trusted them while I stood by the graveside, clutching a handful of dirt that felt heavier than the world. I remembered sitting in the boardroom afterward, still in my black dress, while Isolde smiled at the board members. "Dad wanted continuity," she'd said. "I'll oversee operations until further notice." No one had asked about the will. I hadn't even known I should. The betrayal wasn't just in what they'd taken. It was in how easily I'd let them. I opened the window, needing air. The city looked gray and ordinary outside, the kind of day where people hurried with umbrellas, unaware someone else's world had just cracked open. I pressed the will to my chest, closing my eyes. For the first time in a long while, I felt anger rise, not the quiet kind I'd swallowed for years, but sharp, electric anger. After pacing the room, I made a decision. I pulled out my small fireproof box from the closet, the one that had held my birth certificate and a few photos, and placed the documents inside. I locked it, slid it under the bed. Then I took my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in nearly 5 years. Hello. The voice was rough, familiar. Leo. Iris. A pause. I didn't think I'd ever hear from you again. I need to ask something, I said. Do you still have Dad's recipes in your archives? The originals, the drafts he kept before the restaurant opened. He hesitated. Yeah. Why? Because they're about to erase him, I said. And I'm not letting that happen. There was silence on the line. Then he exhaled slowly. Whatever you need, I've got you. After hanging up, I sat at the table, staring at the sealed window. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered, tired but steadier. The kind of face that no longer waits for permission. The next day, I took copies of the will and the letter to a small print shop downtown. The clerk, a quiet woman with red glasses, scanned them carefully, saving them onto a flash drive. I paid in cash. Walking back, the streets were busy with weekend shoppers, people carrying coffee and flowers, children dragging parents toward toy stores. The world moved forward as if nothing had changed. And yet everything had. At a crosswalk, I caught sight of the restaurant's logo on a passing delivery van, my father's initials stylized in gold. Beneath it, in sleek font, the new tagline Isolde had launched, preserving a legacy of excellence. I almost laughed. They preserved nothing but their own reflection. When I got home, I printed one more copy of the letter and pinned it to my refrigerator. Every time I opened the door, the words would be there waiting. Don't let anyone rewrite your story. That night, I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the couch, listening to the rain start again. The sound filled the silence. I imagined my father sitting beside me, that calm patience of his. He'd always said, "The truth isn't loud, Iris. It just lasts longer than lies." I believed him now. I opened my notebook, the same one I'd written in after Isolde's video, and wrote another line under things I will never forget. The moment I stopped being quiet. As I set the pen down, the room felt less empty. The anger didn't leave, but it settled into something steadier, a direction, not just a wound. It wasn't just my name they erased. It was everything he built. And now I was going to take it back, piece by piece. 2 days after I read the will, I found myself standing in front of a metal storage unit on the outer edge of Portland, just past the rail tracks that separated the city's gentrified heartbeat from its rusted veins. The key had been tucked in the back of the envelope Eldon gave me. Nothing fancy, just a small brass thing with a faded tag, Unit 18. The lock creaked as I twisted it open. Cold air rushed past my face when I pulled the door upward. The space was dark, musty. I flipped the switch just inside, and a lone bulb buzzed to life overhead, casting everything in that yellowed, shaky glow that made you feel like you were inside a memory. Cardboard boxes stacked unevenly, a few old metal shelves, an industrial mixing bowl with a dent in the side, and toward the back, a wooden trunk with scuffed corners and a familiar black leather strap across the top. I walked toward it slowly, the soles of my shoes crunching on dust and bits of gravel. The smell was specific. Aged paper, pine, a whisper of burnt coffee. The kind of scent that lingered in Dad's old apron. I knelt in front of the trunk and unlatched it. Inside, wrapped in wax paper and string, was a leather-bound journal. Thick, worn, stained with something that could have been saffron or blood. On the cover, in my father's tight, unshowy handwriting, kitchen, fire, family. My breath caught. I ran my fingers across the title. The leather was cool, but the warmth underneath it felt alive. I sat on the cold cement floor and opened the first page. Recipes, drafts, ratios, margins filled with notes, his handwriting dancing between precision and poetry. On page 12, revised lemon thyme reduction. Iris said it needed more acid. She was right. My chest tightened. I flipped forward. There were sketches of kitchen layouts, flow diagrams, oven placements. One was labeled, Iris's line, speed plus soul. The further I read, the quieter the room became. I forgot where I was. Near the back, I found a page she'd scribbled on, not part of any recipe. She doesn't need permission. She needs to remember it was always hers. I pressed the journal against my heart and closed my eyes. It smelled like thyme and clove, like the sauce he used to make on cold evenings when the restaurant closed early and we sat on overturned crates eating off mismatched plates. How could they erase this? I set the journal aside carefully and dug deeper into the trunk. Beneath some folders and blueprints, I found a shoebox with faded writing, licensing docs and startup. Inside were receipts, early investment memos, paper trail breadcrumbs of how the restaurant had begun. Then I saw it, a printed invoice from a local bank dated 10 years back, $5,000 transferred from an account under my name. The description, Initial Capital or Table LLC. I remembered it instantly. I'd withdrawn that money from my college fund. At the time, I hadn't told anyone. I just wanted to help. Dad knew, of course. He'd hugged me without saying a word and brought me to the first tasting event like I was a guest of honor. Tucked in the same envelope was a scrap of notebook paper with Isolde's handwriting. Let's keep this quiet. Don't complicate the narrative. Narrative. That's what this had always been about to her. Not truth, not memory, just a story she could control. I sat there, gripping the receipt, as the full weight of their betrayal pressed against me. They hadn't just taken over the business. They had erased my name, my hands, my sacrifices. All of it, like I had never been there. And now, they were planning a gala to celebrate themselves. By the time I got back to the apartment, dusk had settled over the city. The sky was streaked in muted orange, but all I could see was red. I plugged in my laptop and opened a blank email. Subject line, before you host your next gala, a preview of the real narrative. I attached a blurred image of the will's title page. No signature visible, just enough to rattle. Then I scanned a single page from the recipe journal, the one with my name, the sketch labeled Iris's line. No name, no return address, just a digital whisper sent to every member of the board. I hit send. Then I waited. For an hour, there was nothing. No reply, no bounce back, just silence. But it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that signals movement in the dark, like a breath being held too long. I printed out high-resolution copies of every document I had, journal investment receipts, labeled and organized. I backed them up onto 2 flash drives and stored them in different places. One went into the fireproof box under my bed. The other I tucked behind the spice rack. At midnight, my phone lit up. Isolde's number. I didn't answer. I stared at it until the screen went dark. Then I opened my texts and sent her one sentence. You changed the menu. Next time you change history, be careful which pages you leave behind. I didn't expect a response. Instead, I closed my laptop and walked to the balcony. The wind had picked up. Below, the streets were quiet. Only the distant hum of late-night buses and one guy walking his dog. I leaned on the railing, letting the cold settle into my skin. They thought I'd stay quiet, that I'd watch them rewrite everything and say nothing like I always had. But this time, I wasn't playing the quiet sister. I was reclaiming what was mine. She thought I would stay quiet, but her version of the story was full of cracks. The day after I sent the board that anonymous email, I drove out to a franchise location in Beaverton, the first one outside the city that Dad and I had scouted together. I hadn't been there in almost 2 years. The last time I visited, they still had my stew on the menu, Iris's ruined roast. They'd even painted the wall behind the host stand in warm terracotta, something Dad and I had picked because it reminded him of the kitchen in his grandmother's house in El Paso. This time, the color had changed. The wall was now a sterile gray-blue, and the framed print that once displayed Dad's handwritten soup notes had been replaced with a stock photo of a smiling couple eating salad. I stepped inside just after lunch hour, when the place was quieter and less chaotic. The hostess looked barely 20, wearing a crisp white blouse and red lipstick that was too bright for her gentle demeanor. "Table for one," she asked politely. "No, I'm just picking up," I replied. Then I paused. "Actually, can I take a look at your menu?" She handed me a laminated trifold with a flourish. "We got the new Isolde menu last night. Isn't it gorgeous?" I smiled thinly and nodded. But when I opened it, My breath caught in my throat. Not a single item I created remained. The stew. Gone. The tamarind-glazed short ribs. Gone. Even the small things, the olive tapenade I'd added to the appetizer board, the lavender vinaigrette on the summer salad, scrubbed clean. Everything now was signature by Isolde. The font was sleek. The descriptions were pretentious. Nothing had any soul. I sat down at the waiting bench and stared at the menu, slowly folding it into quarters along its creases. She hadn't just erased me. She gutted the entire culinary identity of the place. And no one had questioned it. Back in my car, I texted Marco, the first executive chef Dad ever hired. "Still have time to talk?" He responded almost immediately. "Come to my shop. 15 minutes." Marco ran a small bakery on 6th and Pine. He'd always been loyal to Dad, even after stepping away from the company when Isolde restructured. That was her word, not mine. The place smelled like cinnamon and flour and the faint caramelization of pastry edges when I walked in. Marco looked up from the counter and nodded me toward the back. "What happened?" he asked, wiping his hands on a towel. "They deleted everything," I said simply. He raised an eyebrow. "You mean, the dishes, the menu, my name, the story?" He sighed and pulled a folder from under the counter. "Then I think you need to see this." Inside were printed documents, emails, draft contracts, correspondence with a business broker. I read them in silence, each word landing heavier than the last. Isolde had been trying to sell the restaurant chain. Quietly, privately. She'd had meetings with buyers in New York. The potential deal included full rebranding, no more Edward's Table, no more trace of our father. It would become modern, with new logos, new recipes, new investors. Marco watched my face as I read. She wanted me to stay on as a consultant, but I declined. Told her I'd only work for someone who still understood the soul of the place. I closed the folder. She never wanted to preserve the legacy. She just wanted to polish it enough to pawn it off. He nodded. "You planning to stop her?" "I am," I said, "but not by yelling louder. I'm going to let the truth do the work." That night, I sat at my small kitchen table and opened a new Word document. I started writing an open letter. If what we cook no longer honors the fire that started it, it's not food. It's theater. I typed. It was a sentence Dad had once muttered while watching a competitor plate edible flowers with tweezers. I wrote for 20 minutes. Paragraph after paragraph poured out of me. Memories, warnings, pride. But just before hitting send, I stopped. I saved the letter in my drafts folder and closed the laptop. Not yet. It wasn't time. Not until she'd pushed one step further. And knowing her, she would. 3 days later, I got the invitation. A fundraiser dinner for culinary youth programs. Isolde would be there. So would Varela. So would the cameras. I didn't plan to confront her. I just wanted to look her in the eye. The event was held in a rented banquet space downtown. Crystal chandeliers. Jazz trio in the corner. Hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. I wore black slacks and a blouse I hadn't pulled from the closet since Dad's memorial. As I walked in, Isolde was already mid-conversation with a food blogger, laughing like her life was spotless. She wore emerald green and diamonds, as if she owned grace. I made no scene. Just walked past her slowly, made sure she saw me. "Erase the menu," I said, my voice low but clear. "Change the plaque. But I'm still here." Her smile twitched. Barely. I didn't stop. Didn't wait for a retort. But I felt eyes on us, dozens. Her curated image had cracked just enough to let doubt through. As I stepped outside for air, I pulled out my phone and posted a photo. It was old. Me, my father, and a steaming bowl of stew. I was barely out of college. He was wearing his faded apron. We looked tired. Happy. The caption was short. The name of the dish may change. The story doesn't. Within an hour, the comments began. From former staff. "I remember you made that. Still the best stew we ever served." From old customers. "This is why I came to Edward's Table." From a critic. "Funny how food tastes different when you erase the hands that made it." Isolde didn't reply publicly, but she didn't have to. The ripple had started. This wasn't about attention. It was about anchoring the truth before it drifted too far. And if she kept trying to cut me out, I was ready. I told her to stop rewriting history. She answered by tearing out the last remaining page. 2 mornings later, before the sun had cleared the rooftops, I was jolted awake by the ding of my phone. Bleary-eyed, I swiped it open and saw a notification from Reddit. Someone had tagged my name in a video. At first, I assumed it was more mockery, another repost of the kitchen clip, or a gossip piece stirring the same pot. But this wasn't that. It was a man's voice, rough but steady, recorded in what looked like his dining room. Framed baseball memorabilia hung behind him, and on the table in front of him sat a steaming bowl of stew. "That little girl," he said, eyes squinting behind bifocals. "She created the soup." He paused, looked straight into the lens. "I don't care what their website says now. I was there opening week. Her father brought her out in a flour-dusted apron and said, 'She's the real chef here.' I saw it. I tasted it. And I never forgot it." His name was Mr. Elwin, age 82, a longtime patron and one of Dad's earliest customers. His video had only been up a few hours, but it was spreading, shared on Twitter, Instagram, even Facebook groups with names like Portland Foodies Over 50. The comments were vicious, not toward me but toward Isolde. She stole credit from a teenager? Funny how success makes people forget who started the fire. "Where's Iris now? Someone find her." I didn't post anything in response. I didn't have to. The voices were finally starting to shift. And just in time. That evening, the gala was scheduled to take place downtown at the Whitmore Center, a high-profile event celebrating culinary legacy and innovation. Of course, Isolde was the guest of honor. The plaque would be unveiled. The cameras would roll. I wasn't on the guest list. But I was going. I chose a black dress that blended more than it stood out. Simple flats. Hair pulled into a low knot. No makeup, save for lip balm. In my hand, I carried a plain manila envelope sealed with a red sticker and marked for public record. The Whitmore Center buzzed with people. Clinking glasses. Name tags. Perfume that cost more than my rent. Isolde was front and center, surrounded by donors, reporters, and smiling interns wearing earpieces. She looked radiant, as always. That carefully polished, camera-ready version of herself that knew exactly how to hold a champagne flute and tilt her head to appear thoughtful. Varela stood just behind her, frosty and composed in a pearl-trimmed suit. Together, they looked like royalty surveying their kingdom. I didn't make an entrance. I waited in the back near the coat check, watching, listening. A small team set up the live stream feed. A projector flashed across the stage with the restaurant logo, my father's initials, still being used, still making someone else rich. At 8:17 p.m., Isolde took the stage. "Tonight," she began, her voice smooth as whipped butter, "we celebrate more than just food. We honor tradition. We preserve legacy." My fingers gripped the envelope tighter. "Culinary excellence is not just about ingredients," she continued. "It's about vision. And I'm proud to carry that forward." That's when I stepped forward. No one noticed at first. Then a few heads turned. Then a few more. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage. Calmly, deliberately. I didn't rush. Didn't smile. I reached the podium and placed the envelope beside her notes. She blinked. "Iris." I said nothing. Behind us, the projector screen flickered. The tech team, unsure what was happening, hesitated. But then the watermark appeared. Farrow and Jennings Law Group. And beneath it, in bold letters, "Last Will and Testament of Elias J. Edwards." Gasps erupted. Isolde's lips parted, but no sound came out. I leaned toward the microphone. "You called me a stray," I said evenly. "This stray owns the building." Silence, then the sound of phones being pulled out, screens glowing as people started recording. From the corner of my eye, I saw Varela step forward, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. "Iris, let's speak privately," she said, low and urgent. I shook my head. "You made this public. Now I will too." I turned and walked down the stairs. Isolde didn't move. Her hand hovered over the plaque, waiting to be unveiled. One reporter stood. "Miss Edwards, are you saying the chain belongs to you?" I kept walking. I didn't need to say more. Back in the lobby, someone touched my elbow. It was a staffer from the Whitmore Center. Do you want your envelope back?" No, I replied. That's for everyone. By the time I reached the street, my phone was buzzing nonstop. The video was already online. Headlines were popping up in real time. Real owner of Edwards' empire interrupts gala. Sister rewrites history against her will. My inbox filled with messages from reporters, ex-colleagues, even strangers. One stood out. It was from a dishwasher who'd worked with me during the early days. We saw you. We remember. We're with you. I responded simply, it's not about me. It's about what they tried to erase. The next morning, news outlets ran stories. Podcasts analyzed the moment. Some called it a power play. Others called it justice. I didn't call it anything. I just sat at my kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me, watching the live stream replay without sound. Isolde's face when the screen changed. Virella's tension as the room turned. The board members whispering. The audience filming. It wasn't revenge. It was truth. And truth, once aired, can't be repackaged. Later that day, the board held an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. What I set in motion would unravel on its own. No one can burn a page that exists in too many hands. She should have stopped at lies. Instead, she pulled out a blade. 2 days after the gala, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand like it was possessed. At first, I thought it was more messages from journalists, maybe old coworkers, maybe even a few congratulations texts from people who only remembered me when I was in the news. But when I reached for it, half asleep, I froze. The screen was flooded with notifications, mentions, tags, direct messages. My name was everywhere again. Only this time, it wasn't about the will or the truth. It was about me. The first headline I saw read, Mental health meltdown? Leaked report suggests restaurant heiress has history of delusions. I sat up so quickly the blanket tangled around my legs. My pulse hammered as I scrolled. Someone had posted what looked like a psychiatric evaluation, dated 3 years ago. It said I'd been hospitalized for paranoia, claiming disorganized thinking, and delusional episodes tied to familial loss. It was signed by a Dr. H. Morgan at Cascade Recovery Clinic. Except there was no Dr. Morgan. And that clinic, it had closed 4 years ago. The paper looked official, though. Logo, formatting, signature. Enough to look real to anyone who didn't know better. My stomach dropped. I could almost hear Isolde's voice reading the words out loud with that faux concerned tone she used when she was twisting the knife. Poor Iris, she'd say. She's been through so much. We should all pray she gets the help she needs. That was her style, never a direct attack. Just quiet poison disguised as pity. By 10 a.m., the story was everywhere. Bloggers, gossip accounts, local news. Sources close to the family were quoted saying they'd always suspected something wasn't right. I knew exactly who those sources were. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just sat there, numb, staring at the phone until my coffee went cold. Then came the email. Subject: Cease and desist notice. Edwards Group Holdings. It was from Virella's law team, but she'd added her own personal note at the bottom, in italics, as if she couldn't resist adding her voice. You're unraveling, Iris. Don't embarrass your father's memory any further. My first instinct was to throw the phone. My second was to laugh, because the wording was pure her, controlling, manipulative, pretending to care about honor, when all she wanted was silence. I read it again, slower this time, until the words stopped stinging. Then I hit reply. I didn't send anything yet, but I typed out a draft. Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you. I deleted it. Not worth giving them the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, I opened my contacts and found the number for Dr. Patel, my real therapist. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm as always. Dr. Patel's office. Hi, it's Iris Edwards. I need a favor. Actually, more like a statement. He hesitated only a second. I saw the news. Come in at 3. By the time I got to his office, the rain had started again. Steady, cold Portland rain. I parked on the street and sat there for a moment, watching drops slide down the windshield. The building was small, brick, with an ivy-covered sign that simply read, Wellness and Mind Center. Dr. Patel greeted me at the door, no small talk. He was like that, efficient but kind. I'd seen him a handful of times after Dad's death, back when I couldn't sleep without hearing the echo of the oven timer from the restaurant. He knew exactly what this was. I was treated for grief-related anxiety, I said, sitting down across from him. You have records, right? Yes. He opened his laptop, typing. You were never hospitalized, Iris. Never prescribed anything beyond mild sleep medication. I'll write a statement for you, signed, dated, verifiable. He glanced up. You're sure you want to go public with this? I nodded. They went public first. I'm not hiding from my own healing. Within an hour, I had the letter printed and notarized. It detailed every appointment, every note, every diagnosis, factual, boring, unshakable truth. When I got home, I took a photo of it and posted it to my social media. The caption was short. Healing isn't weakness. Lies are. Then I turned off my phone and waited. By evening, the tide had shifted. Journalists had started investigating. The clinic, on Isolde's forged report, was traced. Out of business, years defunct. The fake doctor? A made-up name. Someone had even spotted the signature copied from a sample form online. One tweet summed it up best. When your sister tries to gaslight an entire city but forgets Google exists. The comments section turned brutal. People who'd once defended her started deleting their posts. She's manipulative. She weaponized mental health stigma. Imagine doing this to your own family. Virella's PR team scrambled to pull content. Isolde's account went silent for the first time in weeks. No more interviews, no statements. Just silence. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was the first breath I'd taken without weight in months. That night, I called my lawyer. He was a quiet man, practical, not easily impressed. I don't want money, I told him. Just a retraction. Public. Formal. He paused. We can draft a demand letter. But Iris, once we start, it'll go beyond the press. Are you ready for that? I smiled faintly. I've been ready since they called me a dog for eating leftovers. He exhaled. All right then. Let's make it official. After we hung up, I walked to the kitchen window. The reflection of city lights bounced off the glass, mixing with my own face. For once, I didn't see the quiet, compliant version of me they'd built. I saw someone who'd learned that truth doesn't whisper, it waits. I wrote one more note to myself on the same list taped to the fridge. No one erases me twice. And this time I meant it. I gave them a chance to stop. But now, it was my turn to end this. After everything they did, after the smear, the silence, the sabotage, I had given them the one thing they never gave me. A chance to stop. A chance to tell the truth and walk away with dignity. They didn't take it. Instead, they doubled down. So when the second gala rolled around, 25 years of culinary excellence, they called it, I knew what I had to do. I didn't need to be there. But my presence was still going to be felt. While they prepared for speeches and spotlight, I was at home in sweats, barefoot, wrapping a small box with a brown paper bag and a piece of red string. Inside, I placed 3 things. The first was a printed copy of Dad's will, clear, legal, stamped and signed. The second was a laminated page from his original recipe book, the one with my name scribbled in the margin beside the words "She got it right." And last a pair of worn wooden chopsticks. His, still darkened, slightly from years of soy and sesame and the grip of his fingers. At the bottom of the box, I wrote a note in pen. 5 words. You erased my name, but not my blood. Then I handed it off to a courier with a specific instruction: deliver it during dessert. No earlier. No later. That night, I watched the live stream from my couch. The Whitmore Ballroom was draped in gold. Lights strung like stars. A string quartet played softly in the background. Rows of industry figures, influencers, bloggers, and investors filled the room in tailored suits and designer gowns. And there they were, Isolde and Virella, walking the red carpet as if they'd built the place brick by brick. The slideshow playing above the stage told a story. Their story. It started with a black and white photo of Dad and quickly moved into a montage of Isolde in every conceivable scenario, consulting with chefs, posing with donors, plating dishes she didn't design. Not once did my face appear. The caption under the main banner read, "Preserving legacy through innovation." Journalists whispered, A few attendees exchanged glances. One board member looked over his shoulder more than once. They were waiting. "Is Iris showing up again?" someone muttered, caught faintly on the live mic. Isolde took the stage, just as dessert plates were being cleared. Her hair was swept into a bun, so tight it looked sculpted. Her voice, when it came through the microphone, was smooth. "Tonight, we honor a journey. A story of passion, of perseverance, of creating more than just a meal. This," she gestured behind her, "this is our legacy." Right on cue, a staff member walked up the side stairs and handed her a small brown box. She paused. "Looks like someone sent us a gift." The audience chuckled politely. She peeled back the paper and opened the lid. Silence. First, confusion crossed her face. Then recognition. Then something else. Something no makeup or poise could hide. She pulled out the laminated page. It fluttered in her hand before she dropped it to the podium. Then the chopsticks. She didn't touch those. When she reached for the final sheet, the will, a projector behind her, synced to the staff's feed, suddenly shifted slides. The room filled with the image of the document. At the bottom, Dad's signature. Below it, mine. My legal claim. Gasps echoed. Someone stood in the back and said, "That's real. That's her name." Isolde's hand trembled. She tried to speak, but her mouth worked without sound. She looked off stage, probably for Varela, but her mother was already moving toward the exit, jaw tight, eyes darting like she could stop the fallout if she just got far enough ahead of it. The plaque that had been resting under a velvet cover on a side table was forgotten. A photographer caught the exact moment the recipe card slipped from Isolde's fingers and landed on the floor face up. The photo was online within minutes. I stayed on the couch, watching the feed loop again and again. I didn't smile. Didn't cry. I just breathed, slow and full, for the first time in years. My phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. "We're clear to move in. The board is convening tomorrow to confirm succession. They're scared." "Good," I said. "But we're not suing." "No." "No," I repeated. "We'll take over next quarter. Not with lawsuits. With structure. With proof. With work." He paused. "You're better than me." "No," I said quietly. "I'm just not done yet." Not long after, I got a message from Leo, my former chef, my old friend. It just said, I cried, "You didn't say a word and still burned it all down." I replied, it was never about fire. It was about light. Later that night, I stood in the bathroom mirror holding Dad's chopsticks in both hands. The wood was smooth from years of use, but still solid. Strong. Like him. "You don't always have to raise your voice," I said softly to the reflection. "Sometimes, silence is the loudest justice there is." The gala went on, technically. The band played. A few people danced. But the room had shifted. Power had shifted. She wanted to write me out, but she forgot something simple. Legacy isn't a speech or a plaque. It's who shows up when no one claps. The fire had passed, but healing that was a slower kind of flame. The fire had passed. The noise, the headlines, the tension, they'd all burned through, leaving behind something quieter. Not peace, exactly. Not yet, but room. 2 months had gone by since the gala. Since that small brown box cracked the veneer they spent years polishing. The empire stood, technically. The doors of Edward's table still opened at 5 p.m. sharp, but something about the place had dimmed. The gloss remained, but the warmth was gone. I chose not to go back. Instead, I opened a kitchen of my own. Small. Not flashy. Tucked into the edge of a quiet street on the outskirts of Portland, where the city stopped pretending and the real people lived. I called it Elias Table. There were no plaques, no press releases, no investors, just people. Mothers balancing babies on their hips, kids learning to rinse vegetables without dropping them. A few veterans, a retired teacher, a father who'd just gotten out of a long hospital stay. We served whoever showed up. No price, no menu, just food, just care. I painted a mural on the back wall myself. Not a portrait, not some mission statement in calligraphy, just a blown-up page from Dad's recipe journal. The one with his notes scratched along the edges, and my name beside his in smudged ink. "Too much oregano. Ask Iris next time." That part made me smile every time I read it. The first week we opened, we had 20 guests. The second week, 40. By the end of the month, we were feeding close to 100 people a day. Every night, I stayed behind to sweep the floor and mop the corners no one else remembered. I liked the quiet, liked knowing there wasn't anyone above me waiting to tell me I was too soft, too sentimental, too slow. Some evenings, when the kids helped wipe down the tables, I'd sit at the counter and watch them, thinking about the girl I used to be. The one who sat alone at the back of that first gala, not allowed to sit with the owners or the chefs, just part of the kitchen staff. I hadn't eaten that night. I'd stared at the stage the entire time, hoping someone would mention my name. They didn't. Not once. Now I watched a young girl, maybe 13, nervously ladle soup into a bowl and carry it carefully to an older woman at the corner table. She glanced back at me, unsure. "Looks better than what we served at that fancy gala," I said with a wink. She grinned, and my heart pulled in that soft, complicated way grief sometimes disguises itself. I never told her who I was. She didn't need to know. As for the others, Isolde, Varela, they didn't disappear, not exactly. Isolde was removed from the board quietly, without ceremony, the same way she tried to remove me from our family story. No lawsuits, no apologies, just gone. Varela stayed silent. Her PR firm pulled her bio from the foundation website. Rumors said she'd moved to California. I didn't follow up. The restaurant itself kept running. They hired a new executive director, someone I'd never met. They rebranded the dessert menu and posted about their updated direction on Instagram. But none of it mattered to me anymore. Because I'd made a choice. I left the glittering nameplates and wine-paired tasting menus behind. I chose steam-stained windows and mismatched bowls. I chose voices that didn't need microphones to matter. That space was poisoned. I told someone once. I didn't want to fix it. I wanted to plant something new. I didn't expect it to be easy, but it was clean, and that mattered more. One Sunday after service ended, I packed up 2 bowls of stew and drove out to the cemetery. It was quiet there, except for the sound of birds flicking from branch to branch. Dad's headstone was simple. Elias J. Edwards, 1951 to 2020. I sat beside it, unwrapped the cloth I'd kept folded in my drawer for years. Inside were his chopsticks, wooden, worn, still darkened at the tips. I laid them on the stone carefully. "I didn't win, Dad," I said. My voice cracked on the word. I just outlasted the lie. The wind moved gently through the trees. I closed my eyes. That was the first time I cried. Not the kind of sobbing that leaves your body shaking, but the quiet kind, the kind that slides down your cheeks and into your collar and leaves salt on your lips without fanfare. When I got back to the kitchen that evening, I found a newspaper folded neatly on the counter. Someone had left it for me. Probably Leo. On the second page, a food columnist had written a short piece. The photo showed a bowl of stew, nothing fancy, no garnish, just honest food. "The flavors were imperfect," he wrote, "but the warmth, unmistakably from someone who remembers the first fire." I folded the paper and tucked it into the drawer beside the spice jars. There would always be stories they'd try to change. People who'd want to smooth the truth until it became fiction. But I'd done my part. I told my piece. They took my seat, but I built the table. And in that small, sunlit kitchen, with hands covered in flour and hearts full of memory, we passed the ladles to the next pair of hands. They erased my name, but not the hunger I left behind. Some legacies aren't stolen in a single blow. They're erased slowly, piece by piece, while everyone's too polite to notice. But the truth? It doesn't vanish. It waits, it lingers, and it finds the ones brave enough to carry it forward. Have you ever been cut out of something you helped build by the very people who were supposed to protect you? Tell me in the comments. I read every story. And if this one stayed with you,